People of God, I want to say this right here. I've said this before, I am pro-police, but this is why I don't support immunity for police officers. I'm pro-police. I believe police need funding. I believe we should support them. I believe it's a blessing to have that type of reinforcement that is out there to protect and serve the citizens. But then you always have some bad apples. Even in the Bible, what Paul said, every time I try to do good, evil is always present. And the horror stories, lately I have been hearing so many horror stories from people who have been oppressed and mistreated by police, where it has grieved my spirit. And I do not think that immunity for police officers that type of law should be passed, because it would be all across the board. And so the bad apples, they get a free pass. It will be harder at detecting and holding them accountable under such a law like that. And I also believe that in the long run, it will also lead to anarchy, and it will be a bad thing to pass such a bill to give police officers immunity. And like I said, I'm pro-police, but you do have bad apples. Some of the horror stories that I have heard lately, it grieves my spirit. No one should be oppressed. You have a lot of young, inexperienced officers that get out here, they get the badge, they get the gun, and then they feel like they have this battery pack in the back of their back, where they can go out and they can oppress innocent people. They can pull up on people, jump out on people. I've heard stories about an incident about the Somerville Police Department, which really made me so upset. I remember Senator Tim Scott said, was it year before last or last year sometime, I think he was down in the low country of South Carolina, and he was racially profiled by one of the police departments down there. Just recently I heard a story where a young man who was on private property minding his own business had officers just roll up on him and start questioning him. His car was parked on private property. He was there with his family, and they ended up taking this man to jail, falsely accusing him of things, forcing him to identify himself, saying he was breaking the law when he really wasn't. Ended up towing this man's car, which was illegal. They violated his civil rights, and so they have nothing really to prove him guilty. Thanks to this man's defense, he had a body camera. He had some footage, but when they arrested him, they took some of the footage, they altered some of his video, but there's still enough evidence there to prove his innocence. You see, officers like this should not only be terminated, but they should also be prosecuted, and then they should have to go and sit in those jail cells that they have taken other people's rights away and had them sitting in. Then you have some officers that pulling over people because, I suspect your tint for your window is too dark, but they're walking up to your car, they're pulling you over, so they suspect your tint is too dark, but they're not using a tint meter to verify what your reading for your tint is. And then they're asking you all these other questions, and then when you have the rightfully to say, well, what does that have to do with this? They're getting an attitude, they're not being courteous. So I think a lot of these young officers are misinformed and also misguided by some of their immature superiors, who may be motivated by whatever things that they're motivated by to approve this type of behavior. No, there are a lot of bad apples. I've seen it. I've worked amongst them. I myself have had to fight through different types of gender and racial discrimination and oppression, and it grieves my spirit to see so many people going through so much, and they don't know their rights, and they don't understand why this keeps happening, why they're being abused by the justice system. And this starts at the top, because if at the top you could have people who actually take these things into consideration. Yes, we have true criminals out there, but there are people who are just everyday law-abiding citizens, and they're not really criminally minded people. And a lot of those people get picked on, and it's not right. And so I don't support a bill to give immunity all across the board. I believe that we need to have righteous people in higher positions who can oversee a lot of the officer conduct and behavior, and then who can also support our good officers, because a lot of times you have a lot of officers, they get a bad rep based off of the few bad apples that are amongst them, and then the officers who are willing to do the right thing, they get labeled and targeted within the police department, because you get the bad apples who feel like their numbers are greater than the number of the ones who standing for the right things, and so they try to target you and keep you from promotions and keep you, blackball you basically. And so unless there's a spirit of righteousness that enters from the top, it's going to continue to get worse. And you have to pray and keep God first. and cover yourself. And also, it's very good to document a lot of your interaction. It really makes me sad at some of the reports that keep coming to me every few days, the things I learn about what people are going through. It makes me sad. Having been a prior law enforcement officer myself, I have never in my entire career violated anyone's right. I have never gone above and beyond to use my that little limited earthly authority to oppress anybody. I don't care about your gender. I don't care about your race. We're all human beings. We're all people of God. And at the end of the day, after you go home and take off that little badge and that uniform, you're still a normal person right up under that. You're just putting on a uniform, which gives you earthly power within whatever jurisdiction and state that you're working in, but you are still a normal person. And you have miserable people, evil people, people with different agendas. They come and they get approved for these jobs. They pass all the tests and the credentials, but their hearts are not right. And that's why we see a lot of the things that we see. And people are tired of being oppressed. And it's wrong. And we need people at the top in high leadership positions who can regulate a lot of disciplinary procedures, when it comes to officers who do go outside of the boundaries and the scope of their duties, who do tell lies, who do harass innocent people. We need accountability in law enforcement and in every profession. Accountability in everything matters, right? So that's just my little 2 cents of, I'm pro-police, but that's why I don't support immunity across the board, because there are some bad apples. I'm not going to act oblivious to that just because I'm pro-police. But yeah, there are bad apples in everything, right? So that's my 2 cents. Y'all have a blessed day.